Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to invite you to take your seats as we're about to begin. And I have a few housekeeping announcements before we get going this morning. First of all, we'd like to invite you to avoid printing and use your personal computers, your handheld devices, laptops, iPads to access the program through the event app and the website. Okay, so if you have your app store, what you do is you look for the UNEP Events app and download that and register. Or you can visit c-circular.org. You may also notice that the conference center is single-use plastic free, so we invite you to use your refillable bottles and the water dispensers and make use of the coffee cup deposit scheme. You're also going to find sustainable food options in the cafeteria and on the first floor and the coffee corners. And please help us make CF Solutions a more sustainable event. And if you're in this room, it means you need to lead by example, okay? Because you were all here for a reason. Now, for the participants who are entitled to a DSA, or Daily Subsistence Allowance, kindly bring the required documents to the C Circular desk just outside this room between 10 and 2 tomorrow or Wednesday to collect your DSAs. Now, if you need any assistance or have any questions throughout the next few days, do reach out to anyone here with a lanyard, okay? Probably not me. I mean, I'm only here for today and I may not be that useful, but I'm sure there are plenty of people in this room who are super useful, okay? And please, lastly, make sure that your phones are put on silent so that we can all get truly immersed and be fully present and engaged. A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first CF Solutions Partnership Week for Marine Plastic Pollution Prevention in Southeast Asia. I'm delighted to see such a wide range of stakeholders in the room, from academia to business, communities, youth, local and national government, international organizations, and of course, UN partners. Where are the youth? Hands up if you're youth. No, there's some people cheating here now, okay. I'd like to put my hand up too, but that's not true. Okay, welcome to the youth in the room. I think it's really important that you're all here as well. My name is Nadia Hutagalung, and I am a UN Goodwill Ambassador, and I'm going to guide you through this first day of Sea of Solutions Week. Now, without further ado, I'd like to invite Ms. Isabel Lewis, Deputy Regional Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific, to deliver her opening remarks. Ms. Lewis, please.
Good morning, Sawadika, Dr. Vijan, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the United Nations Environment Programme, I would like to extend to you a very warm welcome to participate in the Sea of Solutions Partnership Week for Marine Plastic Prevention here at the UN Conference Center in Bangkok. We are very excited to be here at the start of an important week that has been designed for participants from different sectors to share and learn and gather the important developments related to marine plastic pollution. I'm sure all of us here are attending this week because we recognize the problem and we are contributing to solutions, but we would like to share and learn more so that we can reduce plastic waste. Globally, between 8 and 13 million tons of plastic waste enter the oceans every year. Asia has driven the growth in plastic production over recent decades and is the leading plastic consumer. By one estimate, over half of global marine litter comes from only 5 countries in Asia. In 2017, a study estimated that between 1.2 and 2.4 million tons of plastic litter flow from the world's rivers into the oceans annually, with releases from Asian rivers making up to 86% of the total global input. So nowhere is this more significant than here in Southeast Asia, where we are convening to share and learn on how we can address these solutions together. Of course, plastic is present everywhere in our everyday life, and that is why to tackle the problem of plastic pollution, it is significant that so many partnerships and initiatives are needed to appreciate its life cycle and to find solutions. This integrated action of collective approaches using science, business, financing and investment, local and national governments and communities and individuals will continue to be at the forefront to inform solutions and the changes needed across sectors. This region is in a very unique position to change the global outlook on plastic pollution and marine litter. So it is exciting that this week we have some 600 participants convening here at the UN Conference Center, with a large majority from the Southeast Asia region, with a total of 45 countries represented. The journey for solutions is happening all around us. Grassroots initiatives are driving awareness and behavior change, helping to shape government policy as well as business behavior. In this regard, many of you will recall the girls from Bali, Indonesia, who started a whole youth movement called Bye Bye Plastic Bag, which managed to sign an agreement with the government to make Bali a plastic-free community. Businesses are also embarking on innovative and new sustainable business models and are driving development of new technology. Multinationals are making major changes to reduce their plastic footprint and help create markets for sustainable alternatives. Countries such as Thailand and Malaysia are preparing plastic pollution roadmaps. And 9 countries participating in the coordinating body of the Seas of East Asia, COPSI, have adopted a regional action plan on marine litter to support a coherent response. So these are a few of the many examples. So this platform this week, the Sea of Solutions, is designed as an annually occurring event. This week is the inaugural event, providing space to listen, ask, share ideas, challenge, show results, changes, and inspire urgent action. We welcome you to reach out across sectors, share your tools, involve new partners, and create new synergies beyond just networking. As you've heard, today is the first day of a 4-day event. Today we'll dedicate to find solutions with science. Tomorrow we'll discuss solutions for embedding circularity in plastics with businesses. The third day will focus on local actions, essential from communities, youth, government, and businesses. The forum on the 4th day will be the culmination, where collective outcomes of this week will be announced, including the Voices for Solutions pledges, actions, and roadmaps. Altogether, ladies and gentlemen, there will be 20 sessions and some 115 speakers sharing and discussing with you across these sessions. So all this week, we invite you to share and learn and be part of the conversation. We want to hear from you. You want to know your insights, your comments, your suggestions. Please approach any of the Sea of Solutions ambassadors, easily identifiable as you saw with our lanyards and our badges. Please also use the Sea of Solutions app as a way of engagement. You can go to the Apple Store or Google and download UNEP events and choose Sea of Solutions. Share your experience and join the conversation. And finally, on behalf of UNEP and COPSI, we wish to thank all of you for participating and contributing this week and beyond this week. We all can make a difference to reduce plastic waste in some way with our collective actions and decisions. Through sharing and through partnerships, we can leverage these efforts more effectively, moving from the incremental towards the transformational. I also wish to express our sincere appreciation for the inspirational support being provided by the government of Sweden to strengthen our partnerships and the Sea Circular initiative of UNEP and the coordinating body of the Seas of East Asia. So once again, thank you for your kind attention, and I wish you all a successful and productive week, starting with today's sessions towards less plastic wasted. Thank you very much. Kapunka.
Thank you very much, Isabel. Thank you so much. Thank you for bringing up the Bye Bye Plastic Bags girls. I'm very proud of these girls. They're two Indonesian sisters, half Indonesian, based in Bali. And they actually went to the same school as my son, my middle son, which is the Green School in Bali, which is a hotbed of all of these young activists and change makers that are coming up in the world. So awesome. Okay, I'd now like to invite Dr. Wijan Simachaya, the president of the Thailand Environment Institute, to give his keynote address. Dr. Wijan, please.
Thank you. Ms. Isabel Louis, Deputy Director, UNEP, Asia Pacific Region. Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wijan Simachaya. Now I am the president of Thailand Environment Institute, or TEI, which is one of the world think tank on environmental policy for 7 consecutive years by the University of Pennsylvania. I also serve as the Secretary General of Thailand Business Council for Sustainable Development, or TBCSD, which is associated with over 40 leading companies in Thailand. From almost major industry joy to address emerging national sustainable development issues. I am greatly honored to be here on this stage today to deliver a keynote address on the latest science share experience and exchange knowledge on national and international environmental policy, national resources management, and environmental conservation, particularly on the challenges related to plastic waste and marine litter. With the advancement of digital technologies, we all have access to tremendous knowledge, information, and data, and with the modern communication channels, the global community are well connected and aware of situation all around the world. Since the invention of plastic in 19th century, our life have been more safe and comfortable due to its durable, persistent, and low-cost nature. Plastic usage quickly and widely spaced around the world. We use plastic in our everyday life. It protects our water, food, and medicine from contamination, make transportation of material and goods around the world possible. And it used in laboratory, which create great innovation and save life. However, the unmindful and misuse of plastic and the unsuitable waste management could not retain plastic where it should be. A large amount of plastic leak to the environment. It is also estimated that at least 8 million tons of plastic and up in our ocean every year, with an equivalent rate of a garbage truck load worth every minute. The effects of waste pollution have been created. Evidence plastic waste are found everywhere in the world, even in the remote areas, such as on the topmost mountain and in the deepest sea. A number of citizens live or near the mountain high of waste. Some parts of the river and ocean is full of plastic. Moreover, it is estimated that at least 800 species worldwide are affected by marine litter, especially from the 80% of that litter is plastic. More and more scientific findings App also proved the plastic could break down into small pieces called micro or nanoplastic. When these small pieces of plastic are in the ocean, they look like plankton and are found in several of wildlife species, including species which we consume. Advanced scientific research also report the potential impact of these plastic particles to organisms, including human. On the bright side, innovation thinking had led to a number of solutions, including intensive communication tools and channel to advocate and build awareness of these issues to promote sustainable use of plastic and prevent plastic leakage, such as 3R, reduce, reuse, recycle, and also circular economy. Technology to remove plastic debris from the environment, such as the passive cleanup system and interceptor innovation to turn plastic waste to useful resources, such as turning plastic waste to new product that we call upcycling, and using plastic waste as the energy technology to seek alternative material, and interactive knowledge sharing platform which allow on the expert and community to learn from collaboration with each other to solve the challenge and complicate problem. Ladies and gentlemen, it cannot be denied that waste pollution, especially plastic waste, is one of the most troublesome and complicated environmental and sustainable development challenges at all levels. The grassroots community, national, regional, and global levels. The international community from multidisciplinary have been come together to join hands to tackle this matter at the global level. With the pollution, including marine plastic debris, is a scientific significant part of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Plastic pollution challenge are integrated in several sustainable development goals, such as SDG 11, SDG 12, SDG 13, SDG 14, and of course SDG 17. At the regional level, there are several commitments and agreements to tackle marine plastic debris. For ASEAN, for example, ASEAN community had put adopt Bangkok Declaration in combating marine plastic in the ASEAN region together with a framework of action on marine debris with outline key action to combat marine debris, covering policy support and planning, research, innovation, and capacity building, public awareness, education and outreach, and private sector engagement. In addition, ASEAN had endorsed Bangkok 3R Declaration toward prevention of plastic waste pollution through 3R and circular economy. ASEAN also worked with the other international cooperation partner to find the best fit solution to solve the problem in the ASEAN context. These are huge leap for regional unity, collaboration, and commitment to address plastic pollution. For the national level movement, please allow me to share some examples from Thailand. Thailand considers plastic waste as a national issue. We developed and has been implemented a 5-year national master plan on waste management for the year 2016 to the year 2021, together with 20-year roadmap for sustainable consumption and production for the year 2017 to the year 2036, and establish the National Subcommittee on Plastic Waste Management under the National Environmental Board to promote effective and sustainable waste management by creating collaboration among all stakeholders from governments, private, community, and civil society. Furthermore, these multi-stakeholders have come together and initiate a network known as Thailand Public-Private Partnership for Sustainable Plastic and Waste Management, or we call in short PPP Plastic. PPP Plastic currently consists of over 30 government agencies, private companies, and civil society organizations, and continue to grow. The subcommittee and PPP Plastic set out an ambitious goal concentrate on single-use plastic, of reducing plastic marine debris by at least 50%, and our target plastic waste in Thailand to be fully recycled by 2027. PPP Plastic focused on 4 pillars, such as building a community model for plastic circular economy, promoting education and community on waste management to change human behavior for waste segregation and waste disposal, promoting innovation for upcycling plastic waste, and supporting and influencing sound government policy by serving the National Waste Management Subcommittee. The national roadmap already mentioned by Isabel on plastic waste management already approved by the Cabinet in 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, have we done enough? Do we have all we need to tackle marine plastic problem? The answer are yes or no. Yes, we have been investing in raising awareness, mobility of resources, and investing technology to solve that problems. However, it still seems that plastic waste present in the large amount in landfill and in the environment. What else do we have to do? We have to keep working, advocating on the issue, finding the best and most suitable solution and alternative, removing the plastic waste in the environment, and organizing knowledge sharing and technology transfer platform like this Partnership Week for Marine Litter and Plastic Pollution Prevention in Southeast Asia under Sea of Solutions. We need to work together in a big scale, national, regional, and globally to ensure that plastic will belong to its appropriate place, which is not in the environment or in organism. We need to ensure the global community change their behavior on plastic use and waste management to stop plastic leakage. We need to find plastic alternative to which is affordable and durable to keep our water and food clean. We also need to remove the waste that already exists in the environment that ensure that we keep the world wildlife and us clean and safe. Ladies and gentlemen, all of us in this room have the wind, power, and tool to revert the plastic waste pollution crisis and save the world. Our children and the future generation are looking up on us and working with us to find really solve this problem. There is no better time than doing it now, and we have to do it together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wijan, for reminding us of the urgency and the current situation in Thailand, and that we need to use innovation to solve these problems and work together. It's a collective issue, especially with the transboundary issues that we have with plastics. Now, the challenges that we have with marine pollution and mismanaged plastics are clear to all of us. And this week is an opportunity for us to share solutions to these challenges across all sectors and stakeholders in Southeast Asia. Now, just a little bit of background on why I'm here. It's all about storytelling. My mom, my mom's Australian, my dad's Indonesian. I grew up with my mom in Australia. And she used to talk to me about the issues around the planetary systems. This is a long time ago. And she talked about living off the grid and being self-sustainable. And I didn't even understand what these concepts meant at that time. But she planted those seeds in my mind at a very young age, and they've stayed with me, and I've carried that with me throughout my life. And then I was a young mum, and I got my diving license about 26, 27 years ago, before my eldest was born. And then about a year and a half after that, I went diving in the same place. By then, I'd already had my first child. Actually, it was in Thailand. And you know, when I first went diving, the coral was brilliant and bright and so many colors and really diverse. And there were so many fish. And when I went back about a year and a half later, the coral was already degraded. And the fish that were there were in fish traps, and there was already plastic floating in the sea. And it really hit me then. I was like, my goodness, if in my very short lifetime, his world has changed so much, imagine in his lifetime. So I do what I do because I'm a mum, mostly, and because of what my mum has shared with me. So that shares the importance of storytelling and women in these issues, okay? I realized that I had a voice around 1995 when I started on a regional television network, and I used that platform to talk about issues that were important to me. And then fast forward again to about 4 or 5 years ago, I was doing a show for Indonesia called Indonesia, actually for Discovery Channel, called Indonesia, where we traveled all around Indonesia to highlight the beauty of our country. And what was ironic was that we were doing this program to highlight the beauty of Indonesia, and yet everywhere we went was covered in plastic. Even the most remote areas, which are said to be so pristine and beautiful for diving, plastic, rubber slippers, disposables, single-use plastics, dead fish, all floating around everywhere, and how people have such great disregard for the environment. But not only that they don't have a choice. In a lot of places, they don't have a choice. The waste management systems put in place are really not a system at all. So for me personally, even though it's been pretty depressing to see the younger generation, like Bye Bye Plastic Bags, Make a Change World and the Ocean Cleanup, that's the younger generation. They're cleaning up the crap, that we have left for them. And it's a little bit upsetting, but I'm happy to see all of the people in this room together now. But everybody collectively really needs to think about what we've done and how we can actually look to finding solutions, not just over these 4 days, but on an ongoing basis. And as human beings, we make 35,000 choices every day. And if only 10% of those choices were really to think of solutions outside ourselves and for the greater good, imagine how much change could be made. Okay, that's it from me. Just a little bit of a story there. So after this, we're going to break into 2 plenary sessions, okay? And one will be in this room. discussing the state of science and how does scientific research support action to combat marine plastics in Southeast Asia. So that's in this room. If you'd like to stay for that, please do. The other session is gender and social dimensions of marine litter pollution. That is in level 1. And so we don't have any breaks in between the sessions, so I'd like you to be as fluid as possible and to head down to level 1 if that's the room that you're going to. After these parallel sessions, we will break for coffee, and you'll have an opportunity to visit the booths, which are outside the room. And from 11 to 12:30, we will return to this room to speak about the transboundary movement of plastic waste, which will be followed by a lunch break. So I invite you all to join the parallel sessions, both in this room and meeting room G on level 1. And you'll have information on the speakers and everything inside the app, so please do use the app. I'm looking forward to seeing you at some of the sessions later. Thank you so much.
Check 1 2 check check 1 2 check 1 2ไม่มีเสียงไม่ได้ยินเช็ค 1 2ได้ปะเช็ค
Okay, cool.
Just 2 more glasses.
Okay, I see the word there. Okay, no problem.
And do you know where the bong soap is? Sorry? The bong soap? Oh, let me search for him. Yes, you can
From
see.
Korea?
So, no, is head of the environmental...
check 1 2 1 2
Is
Not in the program.
no, it's been added. That's the added. It's the
Okay.
it's the over. Yeah, and we have been here. Okay, so then there's only us.
It's all good. It's all good.
Good morning. So we now start with the next session, well, the first session of the day on the state of science. This is an intimidating room, and we're going to do a bit of a show and tell of what we're working on. If some of you would be kind enough to come closer to us, that would be really much appreciated, and we wouldn't feel as if it was as grand. But, you know, up to you, of course. So please do feel free to come closer and not remain at a distance in the back. So my name is Yuna Lyons. I work at the National University of Singapore, and we've been engaged in this investigation of who does what with respect to marine plastics, and why does pollution from marine plastics matter? What do we really know from a scientific perspective in the context of Southeast Asia particularly? So not so much looking at research outside the region, but research in the region. And so that's why I'm moderating this session. It's because I'm a bit of a chaperone of a large team of us at NUS from different disciplines that are working on this topic. And so the purpose of this session this morning is very much to share a little bit of the findings of our initial research on the status of science. And what was a really difficult exercise was to try to link what the research tells us with what the many bodies, intergovernmental bodies, and the policy, law and policy on marine pollution are telling us, to see the extent to which this science is answering the questions that are asked by the policymakers. So, but the first part is very much the status of the science. So what does natural science research tells us on pollution from marine plastic? Looking at it again, it's really a regional exercise. So looking at it from the perspective of Southeast Asia. So the first two speakers will be first Yuklin Tay on my left, who will bring us back to the report and the findings that we did and completed in May this year. But we now, thanks to a bit of a push by UN Environment and COPSI, we now reviewing all of that, updating it, extending it to more countries in the region, and critically assessing it and trying to improve it. And so that's what my other colleague, Amanda Lim, will present to you briefly. And after this, we will open to Dr. Wenxi Zhu from IOC Westpac, to hear his perspective, having been in this field for a large number of years. And please, we very much hope to hear from you, because this is ongoing work. And indeed, the more we discuss, and the more we'll be able to, and we understand needs from others and work that are being done by others, the more we will be able to synergize and progress, and maybe, hopefully, actually get to some proper results that are needed. So, without further ado, I will leave it to Yukling to start.
Okay, so a very good morning to everyone who's seated here on day one, panel one. So I'm Yukling. So I'll talk about the marine plastics debris science in countries of East Asian seas, in particularly the scientific findings. Yeah. So this version was published earlier this year by a team of marine science and ocean and law policy researchers in NUS. So particularly like what Yuna said before, it's about who does what, because we know that in this region, it's particularly important where we are said to be one of the main contributor of marine plastic, but we have a lack of understanding of who does what do they do, how do they do what, and to what extent. So with funding from United Kingdom, we're able to investigate this properly by identifying the efforts, frameworks, and policies in marine plastics research in the region. So let me lead us through the methodology that was being used in this report. So firstly, we looked at literature search into different medias, for example, publications, proceedings, reports, World Wide Web, where we use a combination and a range of important keywords to pull out relevant publications. And secondly, it was through science combined through forums, symposiums, conferences, and online surveys. So the structure of this report is of 5 main sections, in which the first one is of marine plastic research in each of the 10 ASEAN member states, which Amanda and I will be talking about. And then we also look at the programs and initiatives in the region, global frameworks, notable partnerships, and lastly ending with comparative analysis. So in looking at the scientific findings or the research focus, there was 5 main research focus. Firstly, it was on surveying and monitoring. So through surveying and monitoring, it's the first step to help us grasp whether the extent of plastic pollution we have on hand. Secondly, it was on source differentiation, which tells us where the sources comes from and if there is any mismanagement of plastic pollution. Thirdly, it's on hotspots and accumulation zones in which plastics are found in large amounts and possibly derive where their source is from. Fourthly, it's on impacts in ecology and environment. And lastly, because fishing industry is a bulk of our Southeast Asia region, we looked at abandoned, lost, or otherwise discarded fishing gears. So there are several interesting findings from our research. So when looking at the research focus, we can see that across the 10 different ASEAN member states, there are variation in research focus and extent. In particular, if you look at Indonesia, it shows the greatest display in understanding the several aspects of plastic in the 5 different focus areas. And for example, they are the only country that looked at hotspots and accumulation zones. And across the 10 different member states, we also found out that the common research focus that we have presently is on surveying and monitoring, and also on impacts in ecology and environmental impacts. Yeah. So, the next finding is on, we examine the research methodology that each country used. So in looking at this table again, Indonesia again shows the greatest display of diversity of different research methodologies used. And across the 10 different member states, mostly they did sampling and quantification works. possibly to get the first grasp of how the extent of marine pollution is. And the next, the most common one, is on identification and monitoring. Laboratory work and simulation models are less seen, which might be possible because they are for the later part of the study when it's at the later stage. In our studies or the literature reviewed, we also found out that there is comparable representation of both macro and microplastics in the field. Yeah. And also in our studies, in the studies that we reviewed, the environment in which the plastic that was sampled shows a variation, but across all, it shows that wherever the environment might be, whether it's on or in organism, or it's in sediments or substrate, or in the water, it shows that most of the research is done in the sediment and substrate, and in particularly when referring to this sediment, it's not the deep sea sediments, but it's mostly of coastline and the intertidal beaches. So how does this scientific findings link to policy frameworks to help us combat marine pollution is by comparing it with natural science research with our level of interest by bodies and initiatives in the region, which will be covered on later in the panel. Yeah, we can see that there's different levels of extent and progress. So there's some parity, there's those gaps that are being highlighted, and those that needs more work to be done. Yeah. So from this scientific findings, we do see that there's importance in science in helping us realize the situation and better improve on it. So in our next step forward, in our own research methodology, we are looking at recognizing the improvements that can be done on our own research and to discover and review our updating database because there's more and more science upcoming, and also to expand our scope into the ASEAN Plus 3 because it's a very important key players in our region. So then I'll pass the time over to Amanda, my colleague, to talk more about the improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yuk Ling. So, and thank you today for coming down to listen to us. And I'll be talking about the continuation of this project and expanding our scope into another 3 countries. So this is mainly being headed by Neo Mei Lin from the Tropical Marine Science Institute in Singapore and myself. And all right. So as we've talked about the next steps forward, we'll be updating the Southeast Asian nations with newly published research, with more recently published research, as well as reanalyzing the research that we have previously identified with the new categories that were analyzed based on combinations with policy interests. And as well as expanding it into these three main countries, China, South Korea, and Japan. So Southeast and East Asia seas are all connected, of course. So to develop a holistic understanding of the marine plastic pollution issue in this region, we need to include these big players in the production and use of plastics. And they are also big players in the research of plastics, because just from our preliminary review so far, we found so much more research, so much more research from these countries, and we hope and we are excited to understand what how all these research plays into the entire field of this region. So I'll be taking us through the types of information that we are extracting so far from from the literature review that we are conducting. So other than meta information, which will include the country research groups as source of funding, these information will help us to identify the network of cooperation for marine debris research within and across countries. So, and we'll be able to find out whether research in this region is being conducted by local researchers or from international organizations. And for this other set of categories, for this presentation, I'll be taking you through some of the ways that we've been implementing them with two examples from these two papers. One by Ke et al., which is a laboratory experiment examining the impacts of leachates from polyethylene bags on clam, as well as this one by Mato et al., which was actually one of the first, one of the earlier papers that examined the role of plastic pellets to small industrial nurdles as a potential vector for transport of harmful chemicals. So some of the main categories that we've looked through will include the scope of the work, which will include the specific characteristics of the plastics that are being examined. So in the laboratory experiment, for example, we'll be looking at, that will include the leachates, the type of material, which is polyethylene, and the type of plastic that it comes from, which in this case is plastic bags. And for Mato et al., that would be the material, polypropylene, and the item, which is resin pellets. So this would also include the size of the plastic as well, as that's one of the major interests, whether it's from the microplastics, macroplastics, whether it's lost and abandoned fishing gear, or even from perhaps nanoplastics, which is an emerging class of pollutants, even smaller than microplastics. So we'll also be interested in the geographic location of the work, which will allow us to specify where in the natural environment or the specific geographical locality of the research work. So for the laboratory experiments, that will be that may not be as relevant, but for the field samples, so being able to identify exactly where these are will allow us to understand the geographic distribution of plastics in the marine environment, and how these plastics are being sampled and analyzed. And for the plastic source, that one is quite a new, and we included this category because of strong interest from policymakers and understanding the point of entry of these plastics into the marine environment. And unfortunately, in research, this is generally difficult to track and difficult to track and hard to know. So, of course, for laboratory experiments, this may not be as relevant. For the Mato et al., the plastic nurdles were hypothesized to come from shipping lanes or from the sea in general, which is comparatively vague, I suppose. But we are hoping to see if there are any research that is able to fully identify the locality where the plastics may come from. And for the scale of the work, we'll be examining the environment where the plastics occur. So this could span quite a number of different dimensions, from biological to the ecological habitat to the socio-economic environment. So for Ke et al., for example, the biological environment, so-called, would be the marine bivalve, the clam, that they are testing, as well as the environment that they have conducted experiments in, which is filtered seawater. And for Mato et al., that would be the habitat where they conducted their sampling of plastic nurdles, which were coastal sandy beaches, as well as the surface of water, within canals very near the entry point into the sea. So for the pollution impact, that will allow us to specify exactly what are the impacts of plastic pollution that these research papers are trying to identify. So for Ke et al., that would be on the early life history of the clam, and for Mato et al., that would be the plastics as a vector or as a source of harmful chemicals in the environment. And finally, we've got the different. We'll also be categorizing the research into this into these various categories that were identified from our previous review of Southeast Asian regions, developed when combining research interests as well as policy interests. So taking these two examples again, for Ke et al., that will specifically be looking at the ecological and environmental impact, and for Mato et al., that would be both looking at the ecological and environmental impact, because they are targeting transport and the transport of harmful chemicals on plastic, as well as doing a basic survey of these plastics in the environment. And identifying these will also allow us to match up the research interests with policy interests and seeing where they come under, whether they were part of high priority research or whether they may fill in some gaps in our knowledge. So all this information will be uploaded online. We aim to upload this information online as part of a repository of marine debris research that we are developing that will hopefully be freely available for researchers and stakeholders to use and to contribute. So the aim of this repository would be to allow users to keep up to date with research in this region, what has been done, what hasn't been done, and also hopefully maybe to identify potential collaborators to advance our research. And so for a brief preliminary analysis of what we have done so far for these three regions, this is by no means a complete analysis, just an initial review, but we can already see some interesting results. So in all these countries, the impact and the impact of plastics on the marine environment, as well as surveying the distribution of plastics in the marine environment, are both highly represented in the research, which is quite similar to what we have found for Southeast Asian regions. But in these countries, we've also found a variety of other research interests. So there's a lot of work, for example, coming from China, which is specifically understanding the impacts, which can include examining plastics in marine organisms, as well as the specific dynamics of how chemical pollutants are absorbed by microplastic particles, for example. And there's also some interesting work coming from Japan on computer modeling of the distribution and trajectories of plastics in the sea, and which will allow us to understand hotspots. And South Korea so far has the most wide-ranging research interests, which include some topics that we didn't previously find, such as the economic impacts of plastic pollution and also the process of fragmentation. So all these will, so again, this is a preliminary analysis, and we are looking forward to understanding more and being able to fully characterize the research being conducted in the region. So, and for the not only is there these research, there's also there are also some areas where where we have so far not found any research. I think in particular we could highlight ship hauling, where that this may be a major source of plastics, and but there's so far very little research. So, in summary of our further work, we'll be developing the repository itself, and we'll be presenting some analysis and summary of what is known in the region. We also aim to identify and analyze a network examining a cooperation in marine debris research across countries and institutions. And based on our work, we will also propose a knowledge organization system for plastic pollution in Southeast and East Asia that could maybe that will hopefully encourage sharing of information and foster greater cooperation in the region across all kinds of different stakeholders. And we will also compare the research being conducted with the focuses of regional policies, regulations, and initiatives to identify further knowledge and policy gaps and work towards understanding and finding solutions for the plastic problem. So we'd like to acknowledge, our contributors of the previous project on combating pollution from marine plastics was coordinated by the NUS Center for International Law, and our support for attendance in this conference and our upcoming project will be is provided by NUS UN Environment COPSI project on the development of the GMPL EAS node and funding from the Singapore Maritime Institute under the MPA CIL Ocean Governance Program. And thank you very much.
Thank you. We've had now thank you, Yuqing and Amanda, for giving an overview of the work that we have engaged on. In 2 words, the first, our initial work had highlighted how there's a lot of research to address some policy issues or some political guidance that we get from the intergovernmental bodies, such as the emphasis and the importance to understand, to monitor and to understand the status of plastic. But we'd seen that there were a few gaps, and the gaps, certainly there were several gaps that we've identified, but the contribution to rivers and the fragmentations that are 2 of a number of other gaps, we could still not see very much of that and that's what Amanda highlighted, in the preliminary snapshot that we can gauge from adding 3 more countries and starting to review what more the studies that have come out since we finished last May. We see that the same gaps are still a little bit there. There's possibly a little bit there's more work that has been done in China, Korea, and Japan. So this is extremely useful, but we still find the same lack of an answer on a certain number of questions that are still that are raised, and we see that there's the same enthusiasm in the various states for the same issues that seem to come back, and so that's really what the purpose of our work has been. So in this context, may I please ask you for your comments or your views or feedback or suggestions that you may have in light of the work that you've been doing in that space for so many years.
Okay, thank you very much, Yuna. My name is Wen Shi from the UNESCO Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, particular regional body, IOC Westpac. So since 2016, we have been working on microplastic issues, by setting up the research network and the monitoring network in this region. So I think I would say, I have to very much, acknowledge, the tremendous efforts has been made by the research group. I think a lot of information, publication, literature has been provided. But however, in order to provide their updated information and also to get our member states to take their immediate action, I think, of course, it's not far from enough just to do this analysis based on research literature. So I think maybe the team, need to look for the right people who are doing the right things, in different countries. Because based on the information I noticed, maybe, a lot of actually, based on my also experience over the last 3 years, a lot of efforts have been ongoing and also promoted, advanced by country. So particularly since the GMBEX publication in 2015, a lot of publication has been booming, focused on plastic and also microplastic. So this is something my suggestion. And the second research methodology, whether it's possible, to distinguish the microplastic from plastic, because microplastic, as we know, is a teeny size, and also need a very special, expertise and knowledge, even, laboratory skill to analyze and also to identify its chemical components. So this is something, and on the other side, I think a lot of research actually focus on macroplastic. That's a plastic normally larger than 5 millimeter, or some defined as 25 millimeters. So this is a lot of work could be done through the citizen science approach. So this is something I would say, different target, plastic, plus macro or macro, and different approach. I think you need that. The last point I want to suggest, I think is very important. because science needs to support action, support policy. For most of policymakers, I think the basic question is, what's the situation of plastic pollution in our coastal environment, right? How much distributed in the beach, seawater, surface water, even water column, sediment, and also different marine biota. So I think it would be fantastic if this research analysis can provide an overall review about the level of knowledge about distribution, abundance, source, fate, transport fate, impact. I know it's very challenging because most of our publication nowadays very much focus on distribution and abundance, right? And a few publication deal with source and also particular transport fate. So in terms of microplastic, some place could be microplastic, could be source, but also could be sink. So this is something I think our knowledge, despite a lot of our efforts those years, our knowledge still remain very limited. So this is what I say, we still couldn't understand how the plastic, break down into small pieces through different phyto degradation, biochemical degradation, even through their marine snow transport, and how to transfer through the trophic chain, the food value chain, food chain, and how to finally resolve into the risk to human resources, to human health. So this is something I think if we want to really make our science to support action and policy, I think those kind of scientific challenges certainly need to be addressed, by scientific communities, with different stakeholder groups, and in different methodologies. So these are my 3 suggestions to the review.
Thank you very much. They're very valuable points. Would you like to respond on any of them? I think you've hit on pretty much everything. So ongoing research that we might not have caught, yes, we want to catch it. So I would agree with every point you made, and the emphasis on microplastic rather than macroplastics. We feel that there's probably more that needs to be done on macroplastic before it becomes microplastics. This is extremely valuable points and well taken. Before we get at the end of our short hour session, I would like to open to the floor as if any of you were to any questions you may have or comments or suggestions or of any nature, just to truly to have a discussion rather than we could continue talking about what we do, but we'd like to hear there's a lot of competences in the room and expertise and people working on different projects. Please do share and no one? Yes. Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, for letting me share some information or maybe recommendations. Because as Dr. Vinci Xu had been mentioned about those kind that review the document, as you are present that you are made based on the reviews of the literature reviews, right, and the publication, and the thing I think is one that is missing when you're talking to review the status of the country and then try to summarize about what is going on. Without, if you're looking on only the literature review or on the website or on the media, I think it's not enough to make the review of the country. You should work very close with the local peoples, because you can see that most of government policy, government report, or even monitoring of the government agency is a report in the local language. You see that Asian country, we have the 10 countries, we have almost 10 languages, and then when you didn't include that one, I think we have missed a lot of information. For example, I'm very familiar with the Thailand, a lot of data I had been seen. Most of the data you put in the report in the Thailand, it's very not up to date and very lack of information. Or even we are talking about even the policy, This morning, Dr. Vichan has been gave the keynote speaking. He mentioned a lot about the policy of the Thai governments, but in the report, you mentioned only one policy, and then they have 3 or 4 policies. Even they strengthen about existing law and regulation is not included. And then when you came from even on the research also, it's because you could not expect that in this region you can find a lot of literature print in the international international journals, because we accept one because of English is not the common language in the region. They have a lot of local journals also, at the country level, in university or in research institute. You should look to those local languages as well. You will get more information from that one. And then also I saw many literature you refer to the partnership, partner working on the plastic and microplastic. I'm looking on many names of those. I'm familiar because I used to get the contract with them before, and then I do not sure that you are checking that you check or not that agency or that the activity or NGO still active working on it or not. For example, I used to work in Phuket. They have the SIG. SIG is something like group of the people working with Burnham University in London. They have been very active, 10 years ago. I know 10 years ago. And I regularly receive the information from them because I work as a researcher at the local. And then last 4 or 5 years, I didn't get any new. And the people in charge for that project now, they are working in the hotel already. I met them many times, and then they did not mention about it. And then even I tried to check into the website, I did not see much update or information. This kind of information is very important to be sure that those partner in the plastic activity is still active, and then the other one, when you are to try to analyze the international, intergovernmental, or even non-governmental, I can see that, I don't know that how can you analyze that data. For example, I give you for intergovernmental agencies, you mix up with the international, for example, the organization under UN, FAO, UNEP, and then you mix with the GSAM, you mix with the other. I don't know how can you analyze it, because those kind, in different level. For example, you put a funding agency in the list, to analyze the activity Excel. You put about JEF, and then JEF normally, if I see that, if you talk about activity, JEF is funding almost everything, but in your report, the JEF only 1 or 2 activities support. I think this is why, I think in terms of to categorize those international organization, international governmental, we should be classified into the group very clear. They have the law for funding, they have the law for coordinating, they have the law for implementing. For example, you put the GSAM at the intergovernmental. GSAM is the group is working under UNEP and IOC. When you put with the UNEP and then you put GSAM and then IOC is not there. I don't know how can you analyze, I don't know how you're going to analyze this data and information. That is from, I very briefly looking on the document, I found something in document that I mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. And please do, there certainly are a lot of things that have been missed, because it has to be that way. First, because everything is not visible on the internet, because we always time constraint, we always have budget constraints, so there's only so much we can see. And there was a number of us working on it, but that's why we are reviewing it and improving it. And so if you can send us your comments, that would be extremely appreciated. Because if we are not aware of some things that should be reflected, we would be delighted to do so. And with respect to I won't respond on the analysis of the intergovernmental bodies. It's very much a legal and policy analysis, and this is something that will be discussed more in the session this afternoon on governance, where we'll go through the way we've looked at those bodies and what those definitions are and how we've grouped them, and so how we've gone about trying to analyze. When you're facing so many data points, and you're trying to bucket them or organize them so that you can streamline, so that you can then check whether you have answers to the various questions that are done. It's true that there's a certain level of interpretation that has to happen, and that therefore there are choices and decisions that are made in the way you categorize. And there's always many ways to categorize, and any discussion is welcome on changes or improving the way categorization has been done. Is there any? Yes, please.
Good morning. My name is Anjali. I come from India and specifically Mumbai, which is a coastal city. So locally we have been associated with some institutions, and we are trying to assess how microplastic is getting accumulated, that is bioaccumulated in the food chain, and also some food sources like salt. Because around Mumbai, a lot of salt gets prepared using the same seawater, which is like a raw seawater, not filtered. So, but through the literature review, what we have found out is there are very less methodologies published to actually assess how to see microplastic in salt, or in it's bioaccumulated in fish. But several other food items also have microplastic in it, but there are no definite methodologies, and especially salt industry is really very huge. So it will be really useful if we can also see how microplastic is getting bioaccumulated in several different food sources and coming into the food chain. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And the lack of comparability of data is a major issue. And there's finally, actually, there's more and more information coming through and publications on transfers to food chains, and that's remarkably useful. So yes, well noted. Any suggestions you might have on, because sharing and trying to suggest alternative methodologies so that we would get to some protocols or a set of alternatives so that we have comparable data, I think we would all applaud. So any suggestions is most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Benedict Neal, and I represent Interpol here. In my team, we work in pollution enforcement. I have two small questions, and the first one is regarding methodology, and it echoes the comments that have been made before. I just wanted you to clarify in your literature review which kind of literature was included in your review, meaning do you just look at the white literature, so peer-reviewed papers, publications, or you extend it to a broader scope with the grey literature, organization reports, etc. Maybe I go to the second question later so it doesn't get too confusing.
Yes, we did review everything we could find. So starting with peer-reviewed data, primarily articles, and then expanding, because obviously that was not sufficient and didn't do justice to many topics. And there was, I can't remember, someone made a comment also about socioeconomics, and it's something that, as we were looking primarily at natural science data, we did not look at it, and it's obviously a critical gap in the review that we have done primarily, which we are now aware of and will certainly try to improve on, because there's no way you can deal with this topic without looking at socioeconomics.
Mostly I wanted to add that what we've presented so far is primarily from peer-reviewed research papers online, but as with the previous report, we will be trying to extend into the grey literature as well into regional and local reports as best as we can.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I just want to add some comments to, based on the question, raised from distinguished participants. I think currently, there are a lot of scientific challenges, right? So even for plastic issues, as I mentioned, we still don't know how the plastic are transported and broken into the small teeny particles through the different physical biochemical process. There are a lot of, different assumptions, scientific assumptions. And the second, for the risk assessment, I think a lot of risk assessment, actually methodology level, still remain premature. So there are a lot of scientific work ongoing, trying to find the best, methodology for conducting the ecological risk assessment. I think this is the current approach, but very few papers have been published. So for those kind of, risk, I think, as you mentioned, microplastic has been found in many marine biotas, seabird, fish, marine zooplankton, the small teeny animals. and also, a lot of marine organisms. So far, most are found in gill and also gut, intestinal system. I think I didn't see any paper who mentioned that there's a microplastic found in tissue, the marine animals' tissue. So this is something we have to pass on this, message in a very objective way. And also for a lot of a paper also based on laboratory experiments to see how the impact of plastic, in particular microplastics, on the marine organism. But can you understand in laboratory analysis, normally the researcher put a higher concentration, to see particular, some people look at nanoplastic, how the nanoplastic barrier can cross the cell membrane. So this is our current, level of knowledge. So indeed require, long-term efforts, particular, I think, talking about Southeast Asia. I think the investment from government agency on marine scientific still remain very limited. Although there are different kind of policymaker actions ongoing for several years, but the attention to marine scientific research still remain very limited. So this is something, that's why the knowledge I based on the over last 3 years experience in working with the Southeast Asia scientists on microplastic research and monitoring issues, but not only limited to microplastic issues. Right.
Thank you. So I see other questions, but I also you'd like to, how long do we have?
We're already over time. So
yes. So you would like to say something, please, and then you after, and then I'll have to chat.
Thank you, Järkert and Melanda Kobsi. In the interest of time, just on these last few reflections, I think it's very important to bear in mind here what is published and what is published in a format that's not so easily accessible, and what remains, for most practical purposes, unpublished. And I think, if anything, this is an appeal to all of us doing this work, is we need to get better at getting information out in different forms. Yes, we need to process it well enough, but I think there's quite a large untapped resource in terms of different kinds of data and information that effectively doesn't serve any purpose because it's not in a publicly accessible format. And so I think in a data-constrained environment, it's incumbent on us to really bring knowledge to bear so that it can be used for management and policy applications. Second point is, in relation to what Wenxi was saying a moment ago, is this long-term need. We're talking about influencing policies, for example, which will be driven not only by the environmental status, but also on the environmental impacts, social impacts, and so on, economic impacts. And much of that research is dependent on knowing much, much more about the biological sciences. And so we're not going to solve this overnight. How do we get those foundational pieces in place so that they really underpin a sound, solid understanding of maybe social and economic aspects better than is currently the case? And needless to say, this work should be an opportunity to help us drive attention. It's not the perfect analysis, but it's one that can catalyze action, further attention to driving the sciences forward in a format that really supports better management and policy actions. And on that last point, we shouldn't also be despairing. We know a lot, so it's not like action is constrained on the basis of lack of science. We can do a lot, but we can do much more and much better by continuing with the dedication to good science. Thanks.
You would like to say yes. So the last question.
Yeah. Just information. Good morning. I'm Dr. Shukla from India. We are actually undertaking a study to do microplastic sampling in the river Ganga. Microplastic sampling. So I just wanted to know some literature available, methodology. How do we model that microplastic present in the river, which is going to the sea? Any information, any literature which is, because we could not find much in the published literature. So something unpublished which is available, which can help us.
Let's, yes, please, so we can discuss after and you can provide us. That would be wonderful. I think with this, I have to close because we passed time. I see a few more hands. We going to stay here, and so please do come, and the more and other people that might not have spoken, suggestions you have or research we might have missed or whatever, please come and see us. And so let's thank our speakers and then move on to respect the timeline, or we'll get in serious trouble with the organizers. So thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.